Hi, I'm back finally, and today I'm going to discuss pregnancy and vestibular migraine. So, I've gone through my infertility journey on thedizzycook.com, and a question I get asked so often is, how do you handle vestibular migraine during pregnancy? And does it get worse? And the truth is that none of my doctors could prepare me for it. A lot of them said there was a rule of threes, which means basically a third of their patients feel better when they're pregnant, a third of their patients feel worse, and a third stay the same. So it's kind of a crapshoot on how you're going to feel when you get pregnant and have migraine. And so I had prepared with my neurologist. That's the good thing about going through IVF and infertility treatments, is you know exactly when you're going to get pregnant and how to prepare for it. And so I had prepared with my OB and neurologist and gotten on the same page, and we had a plan for during pregnancy, and then a backup plan, and then a backup plan after that. So a good thing to note is just to discuss with both doctors, so both your OB and your neurologist, because a lot of times the neurologists aren't up to date exactly on what your OB will be safe with and what they're comfortable with. So say you have a very uncomplicated pregnancy, the baby is healthy, but you are really suffering with attacks, they may be more liberal to try more medications depending on your risk analysis. Whereas if you have a very high risk pregnancy, like I did myself, you're really limited on what you can try. And so a lot of neurologists will automatically defer to your OB. So working with both is a really good idea, and don't just take one answer as that's what it is all the time, but discuss it with your multiple doctors. And I even found that in postpartum, like checking on what I could take while breastfeeding, I asked 3 different doctors and I would get 3 different answers. And so I'd always defer to the pediatrician at that point, because they were the most familiar with these kind of meds and what I can and can't take. So at the end of the day, I think you defer to your OB, because your neurologist isn't super familiar with what is tolerated during pregnancy or how that reacts for you and what your pregnancy is like. So deferring and letting your OB make the final decision is the best way you can go. With my pregnancy, I had a lot of nausea, and I find that even with my friend Kayla, she had HG where she was vomiting all the time. I wasn't vomiting 24/7, but I was vomiting multiple times a day. So it was really, really difficult for me to find foods that I could keep down. And as someone who, really tries to follow a migraine diet, even though I've reintroduced a lot of foods, I knew I wanted to be very careful about my diet while I was pregnant, because it's really important to try to keep your trigger load low. You can hear him in the background, he's like crying. But it's really important to keep your trigger load low while you're pregnant, and you have to do that through natural treatments. And so a lot of that was a focus on diet. And so I knew I definitely stayed away from my big triggers, but sometimes my pregnancy cravings would get in the way. Like I would have a really, really strong craving for Chick-fil-A, and I know that makes me dizzy because of the MSG content. So I would have to choose, like, okay, am I going to feel dizzy and sick the rest of the day, or am I going to give in to my craving? And so sometimes my cravings would win out, and I would just spend the rest of the day on the couch, like feeling terrible, but it was worth it, and I could keep it down, and that's just how you have to go. So it's really kind of a tough line to follow that. Just do the best you can with it, and really at the end of the day it comes down to what you can keep down. So a lot of things that work for me, especially for nausea, was everyone suggests ginger, but ginger, I got so sick of ginger. So except for ginger beers and ginger ale, like I just could not stomach like any more ginger. And so I hate it when people suggest that for nausea, because it's like, oh, duh, we already know. So some things that were kind of interesting to me that did help with nausea were actually sour foods. So, which is kind of tough when you're on a migraine diet because you're avoiding citrus. So unless that's, not a trigger for you. So what really helped for me was green apples. So green apple flavored lollipops, and I liked these pops called Yum Pops. You can get them at Whole Foods, and they have like pomegranate and sour cherry and a lot of different good flavors that you can have on a migraine diet. But any green apples, sour green apple, preggie pops were something that I used to take to kind of help with that nausea. Just chopped up green apples, dried green apples. So if you have like an air fryer attachment that you can dehydrate stuff with, or you can buy them, they have like dried green apples without anything in them, no sulfites or anything. Those are really great to have as well. And that was wonderful for my nausea. Other things that I would eat a lot of the time was oatmeal with berries. That was a good thing. Acai bowls. I have a great recipe on the dizzycook.com. So I would do acai bowls with the buckwheat granola. What else did I do? Pastas kind of stay down pretty well, I think. But that was, the green apple thing was probably the best tip. Some of my favorite ginger beers were Regatta brand. It was like a very light ginger beer, so it wasn't super spicy. And I know sometimes with heartburn that can get a little tricky too, with the spice level of ginger beers. And so Regatta was one that had a lot of good ingredients but didn't burn. And I think you can also find it on Amazon or online and have it shipped to you. What else? Those were like my big things on what to eat. But as far as supplements go, like you also have to be careful with supplements, but one that's really good is magnesium. And my OB loved magnesium for me. And so I actually took a combination of magnesium glycinate, which is really good for anxiety and also good for migraine treatment. I added in magnesium citrate, which can sometimes give you digestive issues, but when you're pregnant, you deal with like a lot of constipation. This is so embarrassing, but it's true. So you deal with a lot of constipation, and magnesium citrate can really help with that, get things going. So a lot of times I would take those in the evenings, and then every morning I would still take my magnesium 3 and 8. And especially if you're avoiding caffeine, which you kind of automatically have to do when pregnant, it's really helpful for that cognitive function, brain fog, memory loss. That's something I also kept up with. Now, you do have to get this cleared by your doctor because magnesium can sometimes lower your blood pressure. And so, for some pregnant women, this is really helpful, especially if you're prone to preeclampsia. But again, something to run by your OB before you take. Another thing, nausea. For supplements was B6, and so sometimes I would take a combination of B6 and unisom, which is like the cheap man's Diclegis, or I forget, Bonjesta. I tried to get prescriptions for Bonjesta and Diclegis, and they were so expensive. And so the poor man's way to do it is to take a combination of B6 and unisom, which I actually found pretty helpful, especially B6. And B6 can be continued even after you give birth if you have nausea with your attacks. So that's something that can be really helpful. Other than that, I relied a lot on my Blisslets bands, which are like C bands, but they're cute. They have an acupressure point that goes on your wrists, and those were something I really enjoyed. And also the Allay lamp. So the Allay lamp, I had a lot of anxiety with my pregnancy, and I think that came from all the loss that I experienced in infertility. And so it was really important to me to to focus on mindfulness and try to relax as much as I could. And so in the evenings, I would turn on my aloe lamp and kind of sit there and think about all the good things that I wanted for my baby, any good appointment that passed. Think about, okay, he's growing well. He looks right on schedule. Look at his lips in this, sonogram. He looks just like his father. Just focusing on those good moments and thinking of what I wanted for him in the future too. Like as a child, like I want him to be smart, and I want him to, thinking about the times that we would throw around a baseball or whatever, just focusing on any good moment and visualizing what it looked like to be a mother really helped me with that cognitive part. And the aloe lamp just makes everything a little more relaxing. It's great if you have light sensitivity. And then you can also use it afterwards, like for late night feedings, without waking up baby or anything, keeping the lights low. It's perfect for that. So highly recommend it. I have discount codes on the dizzycook.com, and I'll also add them to this video if you're interested in any of those. Finally, one of the best things you can do when pregnant is to prepare frozen meals. And you're gonna thank yourself whenever this happens, because I brought home my baby during one of the worst ice storms in Texas when power was going out to millions of people. It was like 0 degrees outside. People were losing water all around us, and I was flipping out. And I was so thankful that I had meal prepped on my my swollen feet. I had meal prepped on that, those like poor ankles that were like twice the size that they should have been. And I was just really thankful I did that, because I had things like soups, I had my pot roast recipe, I had my enchiladas and boursin broccoli soup, all frozen and ready to go. And they just saved us the first few weeks when no one could even bring us food. And you will just want those meals like that you can just easily reheat and get to. And I'll drop some of those suggestions in the YouTube comments as well, so that you can reference them. Other than that, I just want to wish you luck, because there's not a lot you can do during this time to help with the dizziness and the vertigo. And I would just strongly recommend leaning into cognitive behavioral techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, anything you can do to stress relief, prenatal massages if that's been approved by your doctor, even acupressure. I had my massage therapist work on acupressure and just kind of rubbing temples and decreasing the stress in my jaw and in my neck. And so following up with that can be a really wonderful thing, especially if you're seeing a massage therapist you trust. But this is an exciting time, and it goes by so slowly when you're in it, but it eventually ends, and that nausea goes away, and all the vomiting and the indigestion and the acid reflux, it all eventually goes away. And I promise you, you will have to reevaluate after you give birth, because what you were doing before you got pregnant and what you were doing after, it changes. And so just go with the flow, be prepared, stay in touch with your neurologist and your OB, and also have a plan for postpartum.